Hey everybody, it's Pooch Van Druten here, along with Chris Rabold.
What's up, folks?
We are enjoying these videos. This is episode 14. We sure do appreciate all y'all watching, subscribing. We're getting a lot of action from outside of the country. People checking our stuff out. Some Chinese folks were checking our stuff out. So that's why we're here. We hope that you guys, even if you get one thing out of this hour-long video, I think that we've kind of done our jobs. Plus, it's a lot of fun for us. So thanks for coming. Today's topic, I thought that we might talk about guys that have a reputation, like you or I, and many others in this business, get hired because they have maybe a signature sound. And I always wonder if the guys that are at this level, let's say, and other people perceive what that signature sound is. Do you know what your signature sound is?
I think I do.
Okay.
And honestly, I would have to say, I don't know how many people would be able to verbalize it, but I know what it is because I every night have a goal. Like I have a mission, I have a goal, I have a very defined thing that I'm going for. So if you're asking me, you want me to tell you what I think it is?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just wondering because it's how this works. Well, no. I always wonder if people, because all right, listen, in my career, when I first started out, I heard a lot of people saying, "Oh man, your drums are amazing." Mm-hmm. Then later on in my career, there were people saying, "Oh man, the guitar tones that you're getting are amazing." And then, so I just wonder if I'm asking myself too, do I really know what my signature sound is?
Yeah. I think for me, and it's on purpose. If someone ever sort of phrases what they like about my show in this way, I'm like, okay, that's exactly what I was trying to do. I would say, and this is nothing groundbreaking here as far as a goal goes, but what I typically get is clean, powerful, powerful and clean is what I get. And then something along the lines of detailed. And when I'm mixing, I almost envision, even if what we're doing is warm and round and maybe kind of a browner toned, low, mid, heavy, earthy. So it still, to me, needs to be very well defined in what it is, in its shape, in its features. I almost think a lot of times when I get to do a cool rock mix, anything heavy or a slam and hip hop or pop song or something like that, I almost picture almost like an athlete, just this ripped athlete that is performing at the highest level. You know what I mean? And
totally.
It's just nailing every move, and you're looking at a superhero. This thing is just so, and that's kind of the way I want my mixes to be. I like tight. I like powerful. I like loud enough. And this is a big one. I like loud. There are times when it's neat to be like, oh, the show is up there. I'm watching a show on that stage up there. What appealed to me as a kid is the sensation of, no, there's a party going on and it's all around me. I'm in it. You know what I mean? That band is doing this thing and it's in the room. We're all in it together. So I like an impactful mix with some volume, but not harsh. And I know I learned that early on, that there were the loud guys and then there were the guys that could somehow make it loud, but your ears didn't hurt, or it was clean and you didn't wince and you didn't, you know what I mean? So,
yes. Well, I mean, it's the terms are good loud and bad loud, right?
Right.
You know, I mean, I've definitely seen a bunch of people where it's like, holy crap, this is really bad loud. And then, you know, good loud is the ones that we're all shooting for, I think. I think you touched on something that's really, you know, something that I shoot for in my mixes is definition. So what I see my role of as a live sound engineer is to not so much be a producer, really. It's about replicating what the recording is in an impactful way, right? So for me, it's like learning every little nuance that they spent months in a studio trying to recreate and trying to emulate that, but in a more impactful way, so that when you're there, you feel the energy of what's going on. And some of the way that I do that, and I think what is part of my particular signature thing is the definition of being able to pick out every single little nuance and instrument up there, you know?
That. Yes. I'm saying that not for you, but like for anyone listening or what, like make that be a goal, because I've enjoyed,
absolutely. Yeah.
I've enjoyed that compliment too. If I could hear everything, you know, I've also felt the dagger of, man, I could only hear really, it just seemed like a dog guitar, you know, I've been on the other end of it too. But yeah, as you're saying it, I implore those out there, make that your goal to where you can hear. You've mentioned with Maiden where, and I had the same thing like in the jam band world where it was a band of 6 people, but people had like their own character. And it wasn't, no one could dip ever. So your goal every night is to make sure everyone's audible at all times. That's what's tough, man. That's a mix right there.
Oh man, no, I know, I did too. I mean, that is honestly the hardest part about Iron Maiden and, well, of any band, but in Iron Maiden in particular, is that people that are Iron Maiden fans are fans of the band, but they're fans of individual band members too. And so they show up and it's like, I'm a Davey guy and I want to hear every single little note that Davey's playing, even when he's not soloing, even when the other guys are soloing, I want to be able to hear my guy, right? Mm-hmm. And that's true of every single band member. And so finding space and definition for all of that is, I think, a real skill. And I think it is more and more the reason that I get hired. I hear that more and more. I think certainly, after working for Iron Maiden for a short amount of time, and they were starting to get feedback from fans and from management and all the people that they thought it sounded amazing, those were kind of the comments they were saying. You know, I could never hear that. I could never hear that tom fill before. I could never hear that guitar part before. I
heard things I had never heard before. That's always that one always feels really good. If it's a song that's been played for years. And people out in the crowd are making note of that.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And that is a goal. So I think if someone asked me, it's funny because the description of what my signature is, the Pooch signature, has changed over time. I think honestly, when I was starting, I was really known for my drums. Like seriously, I've had a lot of people say
good first level black belt kind of thing. You know what I'm saying? That's a good entry into badassedness. But it's also, sorry, man, I got to cut you off.
No, it's true. It's true. Go.
A slippery slope because I too could say that same thing. And if there is one thing I'm good at for sure, you know, and you know me, man, it's like I beat up on myself more than I want to give myself credit sometimes, but I know I'm pretty good at drums. And, the one thing you don't want to be is he's got a great drum sound, but that's all it is. And that's a very stereotypical live sound thing with the lead kick drum. And the reason the drums sound good is they're 8 times louder than everything. Right. And that's bullshit. That is a bullshit mix.
And that's a really good point. So the difference between things just being louder and things being good in the sense of definition, I think is an evolution for me. So for instance, when I first started, even though I was coming from being a recording engineer and a mixer, people latched on to the way that my drums sounded, not because they were louder in my mixes, but because they had more definition and impact. And I think as I was younger, I couldn't figure out how to do that with the rest of my mix.
Yes.
Right.
Well, and I know you and I have talked before. I remember the dumbest shit, but it was a few years ago. You had started Maiden. And maybe I was asking, we were basically talking about, because again, you only have so much room in a stereo bus. You only have so much room in a mix.
I know.
So how do you keep those impactful drums and those badass guitars in where ultimately volume does matter? And how do you not have them mask? Again, that's where we're getting into the skill set here. That's when we're getting to the art of it. You know,
that's totally true. And what's hard about this is, you know, we say that statement that you just said, and now everybody out there right this instant are going, how do we do that?
How do we do it? And let me, and you know what? And I thought to myself, I'm like, oh, I didn't finish the thought. And y'all, Pooch's answer was, man, I don't fucking know. Like, it was literally like, and it was just like, a lot of times our conversations are such that it's just like,
I don't know.
That like you struggle with that too, or you blah, 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 blah. And that was really your answer, was just like, I know, man, I struggle with it.
But you know what it is, though, is very much so is I'm not going to let it beat me, and I will try in every way to make it work. And so I think that's part of it. I may not know the answer to the puzzle, you know, of trying to make these guitars work and whatever, but I not only in rehearsals, but during the tour, I am still spending an hour and a half every single day in my headphones and virtual playback going, I'm not letting this beat me, man. I'm going to figure out a way to make that one little section of that guitar that hasn't worked this entire tour.
I know.
I'm going to make that fucker work if it's the last thing that I do. Tonight's the night.
Yeah.
And so I think that is the answer to that, in the sense of when I say I can't really teach you how to make definition out of a multitude of things when we're talking about only having a limited bandwidth within your mix bus and space and all those kind of things. That is kind of, to me, it's an upper level thing that is not a conscious thought for me, really. It kind of just happens for me. But along with it, the one that I can tell you that I do all the time is it doesn't happen for me that instant. It's an evolution over time where I'm just nicking away at it going, I am going to make this work if it's the last thing that I do. And finally, at some point, it all kind of goes gook. And I go, okay, cool. Now we're in this position. Yeah. I know that maybe doesn't help some people out there. I hope it does. I mean, that's my point to that, is like, never give up. Like, even if you are like, you know, you're saying, I can't make this work. I can't make it work together. Try something else. Do something else. I try drastic changes sometimes to try to make something work. EQ, compression, whatever it is. Drastic changes.
Yeah. And I'll go down swinging too. You know what I mean? Just to the last bell sounds, fighting that thing, trying to get it somewhere.
Totally. But do you have a conscious thought? Like, that's me. I'm saying that I'm not really on this weird, you know, and I'm just being honest. You know, there are a lot of times where I do something in my mix, and if somebody was standing there watching me do it and asked me how I knew to do that, I wouldn't be able to tell them.
No, at a certain point, it really is. And that's the thing, is I could be in any number of moods and walk up to a console and something just happens, you know, once it starts and I am in it and I'm moving and I am reacting. I make a lot of comparisons to athletics, but it's like, you know, you don't want to get an athlete on his heels where he or she is thinking too much. You want them reacting. And I find that we're the same way. You know, I just know to go there. Yeah. I know, just like yourself. I don't always know if you ask me, how did I know? I don't know that I would always know.
But I think that it does come from experimentation.
Yeah.
It comes from years and years of me trying things and just saying, oh, that didn't work. That didn't work. That didn't work. When I'm trying to find a solution, I am bringing up the memories of all of those things.
Right.
Like I tried that with such and such a band and it didn't work. I'm going to try it here.
Or I know this listening environment. I've been here a million times, even if you hadn't been in that literal room one time. Yeah. Those same sorts of things, you know, you've been there. You know what you know.
It's an interesting thing because, you know, in my journey of trying to kind of give back to the sound community and be like, okay, these are some things that I know. If take any of it, and if it works for you, then great. I feel like that's my job in life in the twilight of my career here. In the twilight of my mediocre career. If I can if there's something that I can impart on people, you know, then cool. It makes me feel good that I can do that. But when we start talking about kind of this higher level of my signature, which is this definition, it's a higher level of thinking that I struggle with to teach, if that makes sense. Yeah. Right.
And it needs to be pointed out, and you have. I mean, you said it yourself. It's changed, you know, and I think our styles. Anyone that's had a good deal of success, there's a lot of people that have a good deal of success. If you just your metric is how many gigs have they had? We are at the live sound industry, the front of house more than anywhere. Monitors to a degree, but you get called out in monitors pretty damn fast. The front of house end of things, man, we are like the shining example of like, just stick around long enough, you know, and you just become a name. And there's just a lot. But as far as like the guys in the house who are really, really next level, their sound has progressed over the years. And I think part of that, well, there's a number of reasons, but like you said, you kind of learn what you're good at. And then those are your little poster children of your mix. You know, they're your little stars, but then you realize that's not enough.
Right.
And then you realize how to make everything else. And like, for me, there's things like overheads and bass guitar. Those were like the white whale for me, still are. But you know what? Like, I'm really good at those things now, finally, because they kick my ass for so long. Right.
I know. I totally get it.
Those are two things in live sound which should kick your ass. Like, those are difficult things. And so you learn how to you just learn. And then what you come up with is this thing where suddenly all of your sources are pretty awesome. Something I struggle with, because we do listen at such a deep level, but it's not like you're sitting there going, it's like, it's just part of you. You know.
No, that's true. I know.
You know how to listen.
I know. I the way that I describe this, and I don't want this to sound very, ego driven, and in no way am I saying that I'm Eddie Van Halen, but it's the way that I describe this it's like Eddie Van Halen is a guitar player. And it's not that he's this amazing guitar player because he practiced more than other people and has skills better than other people. There's just something in him that makes him Eddie Van Halen. I think that's true of mixers too. Yeah. I think that there are internal parts that are required for this skill set of being a mixer that is not just good but outstanding. There's a vast difference between those two kind of mixers, and I think unfortunately some of that is kind of God-given, like it's internal. At least in my case, I mean, I know that all the things that I do, there's a lot of them that I didn't learn from somebody. They just happened. And I went, okay, well, this is, what I was meant to do, obviously. So I don't know. Does that make sense? Like, I'm trying to say that there's
no. I feel like
the artistry part of this is what I'm talking about,
Yeah. I'll tell you something I struggle with. This is more as of late, is because we listen so deeply. sometimes I have to stop listening so deeply. I have to quit listening like a mixer, and I just step back. I don't step away from the desk very much, and I literally, if it is just to push myself back, take 2 steps back, or to actively stop mixing for 1 second, to take your hands off the faders and the encoders or the knobs or the what, just stop for a minute. Because you're like me, you're touching something all the time. Even if it's just to do it, to just stop for a minute and pretend like I'm listening to music. Because I get lost in this really deep head trip of like, do I know what music sounds like, or do I just know how to make a lot of things sound good together? Like, because it's a difference.
I know.
I know how to make it, and that's the thing. Like and for me, when we talk about this signature sound, now part of having a sound that's defined for me by power, it's a lot about power and detail and clarity. But the power end of it, if you're not careful, well, first of all, you can get too loud. But if you're not careful, a lot of times power doesn't groove. Power is more mechanical and physical, and music, even even Rammstein or whatever, there's a groove in there. There's some, you know what I mean? It's I've literally never listened to Rammstein in my life, but I'm just trying to think of some big aggressive industrial whatever. So sometimes I go up there when you mix the way I do. It is I'm trying to hit a home run every time. So it's pretty much home run or strikeout. There's no middle ground for me. And there's a mix out there in live sound that is like the most readily accepted mix that it is. And it's very flat, and you can hear everything. And the snare drum keeps time with the kick drum, but it doesn't do anything. Or the bass is there, but you don't really hear notes. Right. But the vocals on top, so it's okay. And I don't know how to do that. So what I'm saying is, so I dominate every night. No, I don't. when I miss,
that's the problem, is that we miss a lot.
And when I miss, it is this big consortium of aggressive sounds that are all hanging out in the air together, and it doesn't groove. Right. So anyway, I struggle with. So what I'm saying is, this elevated plane of listening that I like to think I can get to, I also have to step off of sometimes.
That's interesting. I do the same thing, except that, all right, so I've thought a lot about this, only because I'm trying to tell a younger generation of what should be going on inside of their head while they're mixing, you know what I mean? And so I've tried to overanalyze what I do to try to help other people. And I think what I am the most excellent at, and I think this is true of most engineers, is to be able to pick out an individual thing amongst the 120 inputs and focus solely on that individual thing, and in a dynamic way, in an EQ way, and in a spatial way, only on that. So I can literally, in a mix, I can get lost into a hi-hat that is, in the overall picture of things is not that important, but I can literally fixate myself on that. And the problem with that is that I start doing that to various things while the mix is going on, while the show is happening, and I lose the overall picture of what's happening. And I have to force myself, just like you, to it's almost like one of those movie shots, where you're in something really close, and then you have to pull out and listen to the whole thing. And I have to force myself to listen to it as a musical thing, just like you said. And then it takes me just a millisecond to get right back into whatever that little thing is. But I'm just trying to help people to understand, I don't sit there during a show listening to the overall picture that much, really. Yeah. I literally am focused on one little thing.
And that's my point. Yeah. because sometimes if I do that, not sometimes, I do the same thing. I would like to think we all do. I know, and I too am I'm not listening to music as a whole.
Yeah.
Except on the best of best nights.
But only because we know that the music as a whole is fine and that it's all good. Like we worked hours and hours to get it good. So I've let it go. I'm saying, okay, I know it's good, but this one little thing is important to me and I have to fucking fix that one little thing.
And if one little thing is off in that mix that we feel so strongly is good, we will know. Like,
that's right.
Immediately will we know. I use this analogy kind of talking along the same lines as what we're talking here. I use this analogy a lot about getting lost in a mix and fixating on that hi-hat or fixating on whatever it might be. Years ago when I was production manager for a band I was mixing too, it was Doors. And I went up to the LD, and this is back in the day when guys had to climb the truss and focus the cans. And, he was sitting there and he'd just been squinting at this rig all day long. And he's got this huge look up and it looks really cool, but he's been looking at the individual pieces for so long, he didn't notice that there was one of the ladders that the guys had climbed was like hanging down.
Obviously.
Yeah, like upstage center right in the middle where a logo, like clear as day. And I'm like, hey man, you might want to ask your guys to take that down. And he literally was like, what? What are you talking about?
Wow.
And I laughed because I was like, I get it.
I get it.
He's lost in it.
The signature thing is a question that I think if you're an up and coming mixer, it's maybe something that you should start asking yourself. Like, what am I good at? Like, what are the things? And the reason is because if you don't know what you're good at, how can you sell yourself to somebody?
And what's your goal every night? Are you just, you know what I mean? Yeah.
So I just think it's important that maybe it's something that you should think about is, what is my signature sound? What am I very good at? And also it might help you to focus on the things that you're not good at. Right. Yep. Like, if you feel like your drums and your guitars are amazing, but you just can't get the vocal right, then quit working on your drums and guitars, man. Like, work on your vocal. So anyway, I thought that was something interesting. Kind of along this same vein, sort of, is the never-ending dilemma for me of Smaart versus your ears. So
I did this yesterday.
Listen, do I think Smaart is an amazing tool? Absolutely, 100%. I think that, and I use it on a regular basis. I think it's like virtual playback. It is something that has worked into my workflow that I really probably, if I didn't have it, it would suck if I didn't have it. But the difference, I think, between me and maybe some younger engineers, because I've watched some of these videos of people out there, or the younger engineers, where they talk about Smaart kind of being the messiah. Like it is the end all be all. I look at Smaart, I see that there's some phase coherency here, so I'm going to ignore those couple of frequencies. But everything else is like, this is what's happening. Like if I see the curve right, then it's right. And I would be the first guy to kind of argue with you that that's not true. I mean, I've heard things that sound good that look bad. That's what I meant to say.
No. I was with you 100%.
Yeah. So like I've sat there and been like, oh wow, this is kind of cool and musical, and then looked at Smaart and went, ooh, yes, that's a lot of like 2.5 and 3K. Right. But wait a minute, it doesn't sound like, it's not aggressive. You know what I mean? So there's this whole thing that, and I'm trying to get across to young engineers that Smaart is a tool and it's great, and being able to see audio is important, but it's still fucking audio. So it matters what it sounds like. The guy, I've said this 100 times, the guy holding the 40-ounce beer in the front row doesn't give a fuck what it looks like. You know, what he cares about is, am I standing here in the front row? Can I hear the vocals? And can I hear, whatever guy that I'm standing in front of, whatever band member, I like that guy, if I can hear that guy and it sounds really good and it's big and it's impactful and it's shaking my body, then that's good. it doesn't matter what Smaart is saying. And so speak to that a little bit, but also we'll go down maybe this path too about perceived loudness and measured loudness. And
when I said, I just did this yesterday, I mentioned in another video that I had just tuned a PA. I had I was fortunate enough yesterday to have the opportunity to go out into the wild and with proper social distancing tune a PA. And where I was veering from Smaart, and this was Smaart used in the right way. And I say that for a reason because I'm getting ready to segue into Smaart being used in the wrong way. Okay. Where I was making some tonal choices that broke from my target curve, but I knew why I was doing them because they were in the area. They were right around that 2.25 thing. And that's where you get into Fletcher-Munson curves, perceived loudness, all that kind of. So I knew why I was doing it. But anyway, the big thing as you were talking, I think is just there's a general misunderstanding of when and how to use tuning software. And I'm just going to say Smaart, just like people a lot of times will say Pro Tools. That's our Pro Tools guy, and he uses Ableton. We're just going to keep it simple. We're going to say Smaart. And there are even people that know, when you do measurements with something like Smaart, you are on axis for a reason. With that single stack, and all the other sources are turned off until they're not for a reason. And then when you move that mic off axis, it's for a reason. It's very specific the way that you use the tool. Then you get to showtime, and that mic is sitting somewhere in the room with a million sources going on. And so at that point in time, like you shouldn't have, if you spent that afternoon, even if you weren't involved, what's going on, knowing and believing in the validity and the execution of tuning software of Smaart. You can't then just put it in an area where it's really not meant to give you a super valid reason. You're just, so I think it's a crutch. It's an excuse. It's a thing of fear, and I say all of this, and I have a Smaart screen that always, every tour sits totally to my right.
Me too.
And people a lot of times think I watch it. I don't. When I mix, a lot of times I cock my chair to the right. And if like my rack is here and my console is here, I make this little world where nobody can kind of fuck with me. You know what I'm saying? I
do too. And I do it the other way maybe, but I do the same thing.
Yeah. I've got my little world, and that's what I'm saying. Please don't bother me. And so I'm looking at Smaart, and and I will stare at it. And if I look at something and I know that and I don't just mean via the coherency either. If I know the data is valid and I've looked at it long enough, I'll make a difference. And because we were talking about how deeply we know these mixes, if I know the mix isn't flawed overall at 4K, yet the transfer function is continually peaking there, that's legit. Believe that. There is there's a system anomaly there that needs to be corrected. But I'll have the best night in the world and look over and the thing looks horrible, but I know this is not the time to use it.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
So I have very strong feelings on it, mainly just because I am such a believer and such a proponent in Smaart that I hate to watch it abused. And I also hate to watch it have become the scapegoat for a lot of engineers who don't know how to use it, so they just want to rip on it, being like, I just use my ears. That's stupid.
That's not at all what I was saying. I know, that's not at all what I was saying. I know.
You're not, no, totally, but it's become a scapegoat for a lot of those guys,
I agree. So, I think that, when I say that, hey, use your ears, I'm speaking to an example of what you're describing, like in the middle of a show or whatever, you're looking at stuff. But during the day when you're tuning PAs and looking at it, there's nothing better than having those tools. It's the reason we use them.
And then we turn them off and we listen.
Yes. That's honestly, that's like Smaart used as a tool to align things, to get everything in alignment. There's nothing better to do it. You know what I mean? Like figuring out how to get your subs in alignment along with the side hangs, that now you have 3 sets of side hangs and your main that are all interacting with each other, and using Smaart as a tool to get the best result of that culmination. You just couldn't do that like with your ears. You wouldn't be able to figure out distance wise, like how to do that. And so having that piece of software to do that is imperative in the day and age that we live at. I'm just talking about how much kind of after that people start doing like drastic things to EQ and all kinds of crazy stuff based upon looking at something that may or may not be valid.
I got a great one. So yesterday, we're tuning this system, right? And that had the option on the mains to leave them full range or to put them in some sort of, a cut mode type thing. Now, looking at the data, I quickly, when we turned it on, I went there and I only had one measurement mic. I didn't have all my super slutty 4 that are being it's kind of rogue, a normal person way of doing it. Anyway, I got the curve I was looking for, right? Particularly with the slope to the low end, all this and that. It looked fine. It measured fine. In fact, it measured perfect. I was very happy with what we had. I started listening, however, and very clearly we talked about tuning on here, and I talked about what songs I use, and to that point, the one where it has the run on the neck, it's do 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 do. Guess what? Every boo
was there.
It was there. It was distorted. And I could hear the drivers just farting out on every time. And that didn't measure. And I'm sitting there with the guy's representative from the company, and I'm like, and the big point of this tuning was to tighten the rig up on the low end. And he was kind of like, well, I mean, yeah, but it really should run in that mode. And I'm like, but it sounds bad. Like, I don't give a shit. Like, that note is unacceptable. And that's where we're starting. What happens when we add everything else in? So that was an example of where I got exactly what I was looking for. But the second I listened and identified what was doing it, it was, I don't care what the instrument said.
That's really great. So, pink noise will get you, and really even looking curve. But guess what? Music is dynamic. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So that's a great example of, looking at something and hearing something, which are 2 totally different things, which leads us down this road of perceived loudness and measured loudness. Mm-hmm. It's one of my favorite things to do at a festival is show up and have dudes like bang on their measurement, because they're like, they hear my mix and they go, there's no way that this is 98 dBA weighted. They're like, there's something wrong with this piece of gear. And that is because measured loudness and perceived loudness are 2 totally different things. I'm pretty good at perceived loudness versus the measured. Speak to that a little bit.
Yeah. There's 2 fronts there. There's a dynamic reason for that. There's a peak level versus RMS level reason for that. And then there's also, tonal shaping. And I'll talk about we'll go to the dynamics first. That guy sitting there with his meter, even if it's an average over time, it's going to be, if you have a wildly dynamic mix, even if it's hanging out at 97, but you've got some sloppy drummer that when he gets excited is pushing it at peaks up to 102, enough of those are going to matter.
That's right.
Even if it's, of course, if they ever try to give you a sound limit based on peak, like, that's the worst. I will immediately call bullshit on that and be like, we got to come up with something a little more professional than that. But so let's assume that it is an average. All of those averages matter. So what someone like yourself or I are doing is we're being mindful of our dynamic of the pocket. We're keeping it in a pocket. We're taking the top off. We're not squashing it. And if we are, we're doing it in gentle little steps so it doesn't feel squashed, right?
That's right. No, absolutely.
And that's what we're doing, is we're just keeping a lid on it and we're just putting it in a place dynamically. And there's a little bit of sleight of hand there to where it still sounds dynamic. It absolutely does, but you're watching what's happening to the peak level.
We've talked about this before, just real quick, in that when we're talking about bus compression and mastering all of our buses, all of those little mastering points of those buses leads up to this end result where we're creating a modern sound of that, not overly compressed record, but record that has dynamics in it still, but is still, dude, I can literally take my mix bus and go 98, 97, 96. You know what I mean?
Right.
Seriously, I could do that. Even if you're measuring peak.
Yeah.
And that is because the output of my stuff is a mastered output, if that makes sense.
Yep. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I know where the PA is. I know where I want my PA to sit every night to the decibel. Yeah. It'll only vary a tiny bit either way of that because I know where the mix sits at the same spot. Yeah. And the systems guys that I work with put it up at the same spot. The other thing I think there is learning how to handle the high mids. Learn how to handle the high mid register, either in the sense that there is no guy sitting there with the meter. You can do whatever you want. Man, gun it. Floor it. Go for it. But watch those low mids the high mids, because if you don't know what Fletcher Munson curves are, it's the way the human ear perceives tonality, amplitude amplitude of frequencies as things get louder and softer. It changes how the place where we're the most sensitive are in those high mids, and that's specifically, or they feel that we have evolved that way specifically because that's where human speech. Thank you. Forget what this is. I was looking for a far deeper word. So yes, so that we can communicate. So that's where we're super sensitive. Anyway, the point of that is, if you kind of curtail that a little bit and know where you're going to be mixing, and that's why kind of knowing level wise too is important, because you can hit that consistent listening level, and so our ears are responding the same way every day. You know what I mean?
Totally.
Things will change totally. So make sure that area is in check, because there's no quicker way than to get it's harsh, it's loud, than to be too strong from like 1.6 to 3.15 or 4, maybe go up out of that octave. You know what I mean?
Totally.
So, or if you have to go quieter, knowing that we're more sensitive there. If you do, like, let's say you're somewhere and it is like a 98 dB limit or 97, something that you wouldn't typically do. If any of that stuff is out of the system, put it back in, because it's going to feel closer at a lower volume. You want perceived loudness to be more impact at low volumes. Yes. Shoot for that low mid-range, low section, make that a bit more defined, and all of a sudden you will feel, okay, now it feels like there's some impact to there. Yeah. I think part of this discussion should be about the measured part, because it's getting better, but I will tell you, how many times have you run into somebody where you show up and they go, oh yeah, by the way, it's 98 dB level. And you go, 98 what?
98 what?
Yeah.
Like that is not, that's like, it's not even a sentence. That's like a word in a sentence. Like a complete sentence in audio land is, and literally I say this to people. I go, well, listen, dude, that's like a word in a sentence. That's not a complete sentence in audio land is 98 dBA weighted LEQ over 10 at 120 feet from the downstage edge. You need all of those information. You need what distance, what weighting, and what length of time are you measuring? Is it peak? Is it, those are all things that have to be included in that sentence for it to be a valid statement. Someone walking up to you and saying, it's got to be 98 tonight. That doesn't mean shit to me. 98 what?
In a way, and it's not an excitement I necessarily enjoy. I kind of get excited when they say that. If I counter with 98 what and they go 98, because I'm like, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about.
Totally.
You don't have a set of standards that I'm going to go talk to the production manager.
I know.
I'm going to fill him in as best I can. and let him know, hey, this is horse shit, until they give me something that is a professional standard. We're not doing that.
We're not playing by whatever this rule is, because it's not a rule. Even guys, the guy that shows up with the briefcase and starts setting up microphones and, all that kind of thing. I've run into those guys that don't know what the fuck they're talking about. And they say statements like that, that you just go, dude, like literally you don't know what you're saying. Like you're saying, okay, so it's 98 dB. You're saying 98 dB fast peak.
Right.
Like
that's it.
That's insanity. Like, what are you talking about? That means that my LEQ's got to be like 92.
Yeah.
It's not happening, dude. I don't know what you're talking about. And then they go, well, I don't know. And they wander off and come back later with some sort of, answer to that. And so my point is that there needs to be more education about what measured, when you're speaking about measured, like, there has to be a distance, there has to be a weighting, there has to be a time. Those three things have to exist for this to be a full conversation about what we're talking about.
And you know what you'll find too in those situations, if you are as knowledgeable as them or more knowledgeable, and I was going to say without being a dick, but maybe you just are a dick. Maybe it's just, but if you're knowledgeable enough to hang, you will get, not always, but there may be times where you'll get a little leeway. If you're like, well, look, what are you measuring with? Okay, well, let's put ours next to it. Look, there's a 2 dB discrepancy there. I don't know who's right. I'm just telling you, we're measuring 96, you're 98. That suddenly they're like, I don't know if I want to fuck with this guy, and they're, then you're in Germany where every gig is metered and they have very set standards, but those people, the times there, they know what the hell they're talking about.
They do.
And in Europe, it's commonplace. Here, it's not. And I think, talk about what's coming. I think more noise standards, ordinances. It's just as long as they're realistic, I don't mind. If they're realistic, I'll play ball.
Well, that's the biggest problem, right? And that maybe you guys don't know this out there, but most of these laws were built upon machinery measurement. So a piece of machinery that emanates 98 dBA weighted for 8 hours straight has nothing to do with what we do. So
for 75 minutes, for whatever.
Exactly. And sound laws are oriented for a piece of gear that has solid amount, like OSHA regulation, right? Like, it's like, okay, I get it. You want guys that are standing next to a piece of machinery that's running all the time, steady 98 dB. The studies have shown that's really bad for your hearing. But if there's any sort of fluctuation, if you can get any sort of dynamics away from a steady amount of SPL, then the studies show that there's a drastic change in the amount of hearing loss because of that. So here's the problem. All the legislators are working off of the OSHA standing next to a piece of machinery, and not off of the, hey, we're music and there are moments of 92 and moments of 104, and it's never always 98. It's not a piece of machinery. There's dynamics all over the place. None of that applies to those laws. And so that's the biggest problem when we're talking about some of these laws, Very interesting thing on that Bieber tour. There was a guy in Sweden.
I'm thinking about the crowd noise of the Bieber.
Yes. All right. So yeah.
Where this is going. Yeah.
That is where this is going. Cool. All right. So the problem with LEQ over time is it's exactly what Chris described, where, hey, if you have moments, a lot of moments dynamically of 104, eventually over time that matters. You're going to end up to be where your LEQ just starts creeping up and creeping up and creeping up and creeping up. Well, guess what happens in these pop gigs and, stuff like Justin Bieber? It is unbelievable what comes out of a 15-year-old's mouth. Like, and you put 80,000 of them together and
it's brutal.
It's brutal. Like, literally there were moments, stadiums in Europe, and there were moments where it was like 115A weighted for 15 seconds, because in between songs, literally, like, we would stop a song and I'd have to put my fingers in my ears and then trigger the next snapshot, keeping my fingers in my ears. And then the song would start and they would shut up because they want to hear the song.
Yeah.
But I mean, it was like in between songs was
and
totally
all of that's going into your measurement. Every last second.
Sustained 114 is going to make your LEQ. You're fucked. Yeah. Right. A lot of places kind of ignored it and were just like, yeah, we understand that the LEQ is now into 102 when you were supposed to be at 98.
That's cool.
Which, I would have to have that conversation with them. Like, hey guys, listen, I do measure me at a smaller LEQ, like measure me, at 5 minute or a 3 minute LEQ, and you will discover that I'm really kind of cooking along right here at 100 or whatever the rules were. And they would do that. They would change it and it'd be fine. But there's this guy in Sweden, and I can't remember his name, but he is developing technology. This is really interesting. He's developing technology that he takes a board mix from you, or a mono feed from your console, and it takes into account whenever there is not low end information happening, it stops measuring. So, for instance, as you're mixing along, there's always low end usually going on in your stuff. When I say low end's probably, I don't know what the center of it is, probably 200. Let's say 200.
I was going to say, yeah.
Let's say 200.
Right.
So as you're mixing, pretty much every time, even if it's just an acoustic guitar and a vocal, there is 200 information in that. But when a song stops, there's never 200 in it. It's all 1K, 2K screaming kids. Okay. Right. So literally this piece of software is cooking along. It sees 200. When it gets to a point where it doesn't see 200 anymore, it stops measuring and allows your LEQ to be moments only related to your mix and not moments related to these huge 114 moments. And I thought that was really, really smart, and I hope I hope that software permeates, because I thought especially for these type of artists that we work for, Yep. Cool.
I'll tell you my problem real quick before we jump off this one. My problem with measurements, averages is everybody I work with these days. I mean, I did Nora Jones for a minute, and I've dabbled here and there, but for the most part, everybody that I work with nowadays, doesn't matter the genre, they don't want to take their foot off the gas.
Oh man, I know.
You know what I'm saying? They don't want to throw in the slow song. They don't want to do the ballad. So that's all you need is one to drop.
I know. Dude, that's really funny because I had this, my relationship with Linkin Park was an 11, 12-year relationship, and I could have those conversations with them. And I would actually say to them, I've had this conversation with Mike Shinoda where I've said, hey dude, we're in Switzerland today and the rules are really hardcore. Can you put a slow song about 5 songs into the set? Put something in there where the dynamics get really low, because that'll save the rest of it.
That's it. That's all you got to do. Yeah. But I get it, man. And this competitive is the live show thing, the record industry is a joke as far as profitability for an artist. It's all about the live thing now. And not that people haven't always wanted to give the best show, but it is a super competitive thing. And wait till this coronavirus shit is over. Good
You want to talk about competitive shit. Yeah.
Unbelievable what's going to be going on. And, so it's like nobody wants to take their foot off the gas. So you just have this show that is just start to finish, Like, all right, man. I guess that's what we're doing.
Okay, I guess we're going. Here we go. Yeah. I mean, I was really lucky to work with an artist where I had that relationship where they actually listened to me when I said something like that. Oftentimes, I think if I had tried to walk into Justin Bieber's dressing room and tell him that, that wouldn't have gone well. But it's just, if you have that relationship with the artist that you're working with, then awesome.
For sure.
Well, anyway, we're coming to the end here. Sure do appreciate you guys tuning in. Don't forget, we have the headphone giveaway every week. Tune in and, go put yourself on the list there to win a pair. Andy there in Nashville won a pair last week. Yeah, man, super stoked to get yourself a pair of headphones. Especially the M50s. This is not me, saying, oh no, you should, some manufacturer is giving me headphones and I should, say that they're amazing. It's truly the pair of headphones that I've been using for years and years and years. It's the signature, like what we talked about, signature mixer. The signature of these headphones for me makes a lot of sense. So anyway, thanks a lot for tuning in, guys. We love you, and keep the comments coming. We'll do some more Q&A. All right. Thanks, guys. See you.